social, aesthetic, and religious impact by the Ravi Varma Press upon the country's imagination and popular culture. A lot of the profession, Ganesh here has found an interest in art, I believe, since he was 15, collecting for lithographs from the Ravi Varma Press. As his collection grew, his interest and admiration seems to have grown for Ravi Varma and has translated um, eventually into curatorial projects, the establishment of the Ganesha Swami Foundation, which holds this collection, and of course this mammoth 6 volume book project. The first volume that we're launching today is called The Shaping of an Artist and talks about Ravi Varma's life and what inspired his painting. And a few copies of the book are available for sale at a discounted rate right outside the auditorium. So please feel free to buy a copy on your way out as well, of course. Before we begin, I want to also very quickly thank Priyanka for the signable, who is our ISL interpreter for today's evening, and to also remind everyone to turn their phones off or put it on silent for the course of the session. Um, Thank you for coming on board, Ganesh, to do this.
My pleasure to be here. And I also have to thank Abhishek and Kamini. Rucha helped me so much with the map collection as I went about doing the researching on it. And Shilpa, thank you so much. The entire team of map. I think I want to take the opportunity because this is the first time I'm on this side of the border that I want to congratulate map for what it's done and given us such a stellar landmark right in the middle of the city for something which I think we've all thirsted for in Bangalore for a very long time. So it's a wonderful venue. I take the opportunity to thank all of you for doing this.
Thank you so much. So, without further ado, I guess we jump straight into it. And the first question, of course, is 6 volumes. How much is there to explore in this narrative? Tell us a little bit about how the volumes are structured and why you felt the need for so many actually to explore Ravivarma's
So basically, what happened was it was in 2000 and August of 2018, where it was Rupika Chavla who suggested that I start writing a book on Ravi Varma. And I think the first question which I actually asked myself is there anything new to be written? Uh, Rupika herself had written such a beautiful book on the artist. I said, if there is something new, then it's worth putting a name to. Otherwise, there's simply no point in being part of a borrowed narrative. Very quickly, I came to the conclusion that if and I always wanted to take Ravi Varma out of isolation and place him in context because that's how we all are. We are who we are because of the people who make us so, the circumstances who makes us so, and this is true with the artist as well. So I said, if we were to take Ravi Varma and place him in the context of a larger happening, then who are the people who are making the artist? Who are the people who are part of the image making team? Who are the people who are part of, taking it to the public? What happens after it goes into the public? Who are the people who are lapping it up? Who are the people who are appreciating it? Who are the people who are criticizing it? And, it takes it from when you take it from isolation to context, it goes from a view to a vision, and it goes from 1 to 6 volumes. Uh, and when it actually goes into the public domain, the public realm, the common man, it moves away from a patron to the public. It's a completely new dynamic, a completely new dynamic. It's not just about, of course, this speaks a lot about the patronage. All the volumes do speak about patronage, but largely also what happens is when it goes into the public, these are people, and I use the word again, for thirsting for some sort of imagery, religious imagery, aesthetic notions, theater, all of this is happening. And how do they sort of absorb it into society? And it becomes an integral part of the pictorial landscape of India. So that was the major thing, which is different from what I do to what most of the other people have done. The challenge was that I went about the research, so that is volume 2. This is the print proof of volume 2. And this is the print proof of volume 3. But I have to be honest with you, we've changed the cover image of this because it's just too light for. And that, of course, is the dust jacket for volume 4. 5 and 6 is still evolving. Basically, what happens is, so this huge amount of information lands into my laptop. And how do you structure it into a meaningful narrative? So it was initially designed as a two volume sort of set. Volume 1 and 2 has to be read together. Volume 1 speaks about the artist, a biography of the not just the artist but the entire Kilimanor group of people. And the second chapter of volume 1 speaks about all the influences which Ravi Varma encounters as he goes about creating the image. Volume 2, the image is created. And now it goes from patent to public. How? Through the agency of the Ravi Varma Press. And the second chapter in volume 2 says, after it goes into the public space, what all does it influence? It influences law, it influences law, obscenity litigation, copyright litigation. There's a whole bunch of stuff which is going on. Once you've read volume 1 and 2, it lays down the foundation for the analysis of the images. Volume 3 deals with images intended for worship. So it's not just Hindu. We have the Muslims, we have the Christian images, Sikh, there are the pontiffs, the saints, all of them. Volume 4, that is the one there, um, is the Epics Imagined. It's actually the largest volume, it's 392 pages, and it deals with the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Volume 5 is Krishna, Leela, and Nataka. So it deals with Srimad Bhagavatam, Gita Govinda, and the plays, Shakuntala, and all of that. And the sixth volume is Power and Enchantment. So images of power and the allure of the feminine. I like the way in which you sort of winked or something like that when I said enchantment. Yeah.
Well, unintended entirely, but no, that's really interesting to kind of what you're talking about, the transition from the patron to the public, which of course is central to any thinking about Ravi Verma in terms of his own artistic practice, moving from commercial printings of a certain nature into the press, and then much wider dissemination that also, like you said, operated in different circuits, right? Began to enter into the homes, and then from there began to influence a whole host of people, their aesthetic choices into other mediums as well, whether within art in terms of things like film, but also like you're saying in the broader public sphere, whether it's more and so on. Um, and so to this idea where you were talking about, um, where originally Ravi Varma is being shaped as an artist, which of course is something that the first volume is really focusing on a little bit, talking about his biographical journey, and then looking at all the encounters with both people and with practices that could have influenced him. Tell us a little bit in terms of this whole context of patronage within which he operated, right? So something that I was interested in when reading your book was looking at this sort of uh, two ideas of patronage that come up. One being the monetary aspects of things that allow the artist economically to treat practice as livelihood. And two, then the larger social kind of idea of exposure, of encouraging art, something that you've also linked to the family, where talking about people in the family being artists and so on.
So, yeah, so uh, this volume actually speaks of two forms of patronage. I would like to come to this. This is very important also. One, of course, is let me deal with the monetary aspect first. Ravi Varma, if you look at the Baroda State Archives and you look at, so they're and the Kerala State Archives, they actually have exact numbers of how much Ravi Varma was paid, and Mysore also. You look at these, and right from the very beginning, you look at Ravi Verma going into Baroda. Um, he's not very well known even at that time. It's because of Sir Madhav Rao that he lands up going into Baroda. And he's paid this huge amount of to paint these five fabulous pictures, which continue to remain in the Royal Gaikwad collection. And from there, it only keeps getting better and better and better for him until finally he lands up in Mysore, and the paintings which are now in the Jagan Mohan, huge amount of money he makes. And for that time, and the exact numbers are here. And at that point in time, you are thinking to yourself, my God, this Indian artist is making so much of money. But what is interesting is if you look at Baroda's larger archive, not just the archive relating to Ravi Verma, that does not find a place in the book because this book is about Ravi Verma. Baroda is not paying the other artists as much as they're paying Ravi Verma, but Mysore is paying European artists much more than Ravi Verma is being paid. So if you look at whether Ravi Verma was a favorite for Baroda, probably he was. For Mysore, from the monetary side, probably not. Uh, so, that's a very interesting thing about placing Ravi Verma within that larger monetary um, patronage. But there was something more which happened in Travancore. For Travancore, it wasn't about money. It was about Kilimanor being associated with Travancore. Of course, a lot of they are matrilineal, and therefore a lot of the husbands they married people from a whole bunch of these aristocratic houses. One of them, of course, was Kilimanor. So when Ravi Varma was in Kilimanor and when you're in your hometown, there's a lot more of a dynamic which is going on. It's not just about the money. And this you see as Ravi Varma goes through three Maharajas in Travancore. The one with Vishakam Tirunal, largely till now, people have said he had a major fallout with Vishakam Tirunal. And they wanted to suspend his honorarium as an artist and all of that. But I argue in this book that I don't think it was entirely true. Because after Vishakam Tirunal is between 1818 1885. Two of the major commissions actually takes place during Vishakam Tirunal's tenure as a Maharaja. And on one occasion, Ravi Verma's painting is actually sent to Calcutta for an exhibition. So I don't think Vishakam Tirunal took anything personally. I think he was a much more pragmatic Maharaja than the earlier biographers are making out to be. This is something which is very interesting because this is the first time actually it features in the book, in any book for that matter, is a lot of people actually think that it was Ravi Verma who was instrumental into taking it from illustration to perspectival realism. But the reality is in the Travancore example, it wasn't Ravi Verma, it was this man, Varma Raja Verma, who was Ravi Verma's maternal uncle. How I spotted that was actually quite by chance. What had happened was I was appointed the honorary curator of the Sri Chitra Art Gallery, which they're doing a new building of now. And one of the conditions I said, even before I said I agree to curating, is that you must give me carte blanche of your collection. I'm not going to be told what to display and what not to display. This is my call to take. If you allow that to happen, I am happy to do it. One of the early catalogs of the Sri Chitra Art Gallery dates to 1935. And in 1935, they speak of four paintings by this man, Varnit Rinal Raja Rajavarma. Two of them are like the ones which you see on top, Ditto Tanjore paintings. They completely come out of the Tanjore school. And two of them are like this. For the very first time, all the four of them feature in a single book. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to highlight from the book what James Cousins is the person who actually authors the first catalog in 1935. And James Cousins says um, these two pictures, the ones which you see at the bottom, they are, and I'm reading from that catalog, the earliest pictures showing the beginnings over a century ago of the use of the European style by Indian artists. So, this threshold moment, which is largely attributed to Ravi Verma, actually goes a little before that to this generation. And this is the only book which has all the four pictures. You have both the Tanjors and you have both of these. Of course, one of them is damaged, so it is a slightly smaller image. But this one is a double screen.
So I wanted to just take a minute to talk about this thing with Europe and native indigenous traditions for a second. In your book, there's this bit where you're talking about how Ravi Verma um, had, you feel that he had an investment in taking art to the public or democratizing it even prior to the press, and which is a whole other kind of democratization that happens. But this idea that he was showing work in public exhibitions before they went through the Pereira or before they went to Chicago and so on. And he had this story that you referred to about, um, someone telling him off because he asked a common person their opinion, and then the argument ensued, and Ravi Verma talked about how this whole thing of promoting taste in the public was important. And I kind of just wanted to maybe stop a minute to talk about this because I was thinking about this in relation to this larger context of European taste and Indian taste, um, and how these two are kind of fitted together against each other in this narrative where you're talking about this idea of educating the public to a certain more refined responsibility. And then on the other hand, the sort of reviews that he carries with it of people commenting on works. And there's one where you have someone writing rather scathingly of a portrait of a prince dressed in modern garb on a unicycle and so
Yeah.
on. So I just wanted you to maybe talk about the contrast of these motives and what's happening in terms of who's dictating these tastes and how is that being shaped within this context.
So I think what was happening at that particular time in India and continues to happen even today is that at that was the period of time when we had a whole bunch, and that's entirely the second chapter of the book, is that a whole bunch of these so-called distinct elements, Indian, European, Tangier, Kathakali, uh, theatre, are all being put into the blender and the switch is turned on. And then you have the Raviva image. So that's basically what chapter 2 does. It tries to separate. So I'm trying to be the chef by saying, so there's a little bit of salt, there's a little bit of this, there's a little bit of that. From the dish, we are trying to extrapolate all of that. This is one dynamic. The second dynamic is what is preferred by a patron versus the public sensibility. Volume 1 only lays the foundation to tell you that this is going to be the strain throughout the volumes. That the patron is going to be thinking of something, but the public is going to be thinking of something else. And largely, it doesn't conclude itself. It leaves the question open because you have to leave the question open as to whether the patron's view is the sanctified view or the public's view is the sanctified view, or really does it matter? Why? Because each person reacts to an image in a different way. Now, for instance, take volume 3. Volume 3 is all about images intended for worship. And you will notice that it's so heavily referenced that it will get into the Agni Purana says Saraswati must be da, 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 and Ravi Verma doesn't do it. But the public are lapping it up. She continues to remain this object of worship, this object of counsel, this object of catharsis, and all of that. So, does it matter? When art gets into the public space or into any space, should we be judging? And this is largely what Ravi Verma also asks right from the beginning. Who are you to dictate this is how it should be? This is important.
So one of the things you're saying there, I mean, that's a, I suppose, a much larger sort of question on who judges that, right? And that's the value of it. And I'm sure in your books, as you talk more about the press, that also becomes even more of a relevant question because the moment that you know the photographs come in, then you're also talking about something that is affordable, and a whole other question which is in relation to this idea of who gets to own, who gets to judge the value, and where is the value coming from. Um, but I do want to take a step back to this thing that you were talking about, this blending of all elements, because I think with what you were saying here, that Ravi Verma is regarded as this figure of visual modernism, right? First person to bring Western perspective and technique, but there are other perhaps precursors in some ways. Um, and to kind of also look at the fact that some of these, what you're saying, are also elements of these, so that it's not just this larger aesthetic that you're talking about. But in some of the images, for example, there was this portrait of, I believe it was Lakshmi Bai, um, where you're talking about the books that you see by her. And I found that detail really fascinating that you can actually see the titles of the books and that the books brings in this whole context of European, um, presence without sort of being necessarily the focal point of this portrait at all, which is, if you kind of look at the larger picture, does not have the other elements. It doesn't really have the European sort of pillars or things like that, but is sort of more subtly thrown in there, right? And so, in terms of this idea of Western influences versus um, Indian or indigenous influences, um, whether there is anything that you kind of having, looked at all of this work and having been doing this research for a while, anything that you see in terms of the trajectory where Ravi Verma is cultivating a particular perspective of this.
Is there something pure? I don't think there is anything which is pure. I think it's always this result of an amalgam of influences. And that is clearly with Ravi Verma. You see, there's a sort of technical bit of logic. Let us assume you take carrots and you take cucumbers and you take something else, and then you decide to bring it all together into a dish. It's very easy for me to say the dish is not pure, but the dish is an entity in itself of many, many constituent things. So, while a person like me could probably say that's a carrot, that came from there, that came from there, that came from there, the other way of looking at it is the dish is an entity on its own and has a life, has a character, has a name, has a title, has a taste, has an ability to of appreciation on its own merit. The same thing is with Ravi. So, which actually gets into it, of course, is very heavily detailed and discussed. But at the end result will be what Ravi Verma does with it. But if you were to ask me, is there a clash between an European ideology and or a European aesthetic and an Indian aesthetic? There is. He's somehow able to make them look similar. You will find this so extensively in volume 6 when you're dealing with images of the women. And you can't imagine that you're looking at an Indian, you look at Ravi Verma image, you're saying, ha, Indian. And very next to it, you're now going to have the exact illustration from where he takes it. That's not. In fact, one of them I think is here. Let me just show that to you. It's just to show you that there is actually no such thing as this purely came from here. The one on the left, of course, is a Ravi Verma, but it's exactly from an Orientalist painting, which you find in the book. So is it a pure Indian aesthetic? Of course. But if I only showed you this, you say, "Ha, what a beautiful Malabar work."
Right? And I think that is actually a good segue into perhaps you sharing a little bit on stuff that in the book you're talking about as what you have separated out as the ingredients of influence. Maybe starting with Kathakali or something.
Yes. Kathakali is very important to Ravi Varma. And the thing is that, the first book, of course, theoretically mentions the various influences it gets into for what is a Pachavesham, what is a Paipavesham, what is a Valladadi, and all of this is very, very theoretical. And Kilimanur and Kilimanur and Kathakali and a dance tradition largely were so inextricably intertwined that on one occasion I actually mentioned in my speech is that as much as Kilimanur has given to the world visual art, Kilimanur also gave dance. And what you actually see, the one on the left, is Uma Amba Tamburati's script for a Tullal dance performance, Parvati Swayamvaram. Ravi Varma had it printed into a limited edition book. There's only one of it left now, and the front page of it features in the volume. But for me to actually tell you and show you, saying yes, Kathakali did influence. What I've done in the PPT today is I'm going to show you a deco into volume 4. And what you're seeing now is this painting. Stop it there. This is Draupadi and Sinhika. Now, if you ask anybody what is Draupadi, they will tell you she's a character from the Mahabharata. But if I ask you who is Simhika, you will be it will be very difficult for you to find a Simhika character in the Mahabharata because she's not there. Simhika is a character from a Kathakali play called Kirimira Vadam, which was written by Kottayam Thambiran. It's purely only from the play. Ravi Varma makes this image out of that. So, what's the story before we actually get into it? Because you have to understand the story. So, it largely borrows from the Vana Parva of the Mahabharata. The Pandavas are, of course, are in the forest, and there's an Asura called Shatula, and Shatula is killed by one of the Pandavas. So Simhika gets furious. She says, "You killed my spouse. I'm going to kill yours." So, very simple justice. I mean, if justice was that simple, we lawyers would have had no work. But justice is not, and neither is the play. So, what happens? She says, let me devise this major plan. So, she says, "I'm going to transform myself into an enchantress. Go by the name of Lalita, and actually go up to Draupadi and say, I'm good looking, so I've got to be good," which is the other sort of thing, and says, "Come with me to the forest. In the forest, there is this temple. You go there and worship. Everything which you want will come true." Draupadi starts getting a little reticent. She gets afraid. She says, "I don't know what's going to really happen." So I'm going to show you the Kathakali play. Let's go on to the next slide. Look at this, but before we go into that, look at the gestures. Huh? Look at the gestures of both these people, and now let's look at the Kathakali play. You have to play it. It's a video slide. This one. No? Okay, it doesn't play. That's all right. Look at the pose. Go to the next slide. You see the pose. It's the exact pose from Kathakali. It's not just the pose, but you look at the Asura who's on that side. Look at the strong jawline. And look at the strong jawline here. Look at Draupadi and look at Draupadi's pose. So Ravi Varma captures this element from a Kathakali play and makes it that painting. So how is it your?
Well, I think you're going to tell us that now.
But I have to tell you, in the so I've seen all of these Kathakali plays, and I was like, why should the others also not see it? So I'm going to kind of tell you what you're expecting in volume 4 and 5 is you're actually going to get QR codes in the book, and we're going to tell you scan the QR code and see the play. So that's happening in volume 4 and 5.
So later performances. Go ahead.
Some are earlier, some of them are archival performances, some of them are songs. So the book is going to seem
That's a dream. But bringing you back to your question on how is it European, I believe that the next slides are a little bit about the European influences then on photography.
photography.
Okay. Uh,
Photography. Let's get into photography. So photography is something which is a very understated element in the larger Ravi Varma legacy. Photography features throughout. It features in from volume one all the way to volume six. Photography is integral to the narrative. Photography is important both before the making of the painting as also after the painting is made. After the painting is made, Ravi Varma did photograph his works. Whether it was to create a catalog of his works, we really don't know. But many of these archival photographs feature for the first time in publication. And they're very important to the Ravi Varma narrative because these are photographs of the paintings immediately after they left the easel. So if you get the same painting now and it is damaged, any restorer will be able to look at the painting and tell you exactly where what is going on. So this is one aspect of it. This book deals and lays down what happens with photography before the image is made. Ravi Varma did extensively use photographs for his painting and compositions. I argued in the book that Ravi Varma not only composed the painting, but Ravi Varma also actually composed the photographs himself. And how do we know that? Is because many of the compositions are identical to the final painting, right? And in one very rare one is this: the sitter is there, half of the sitter's face is damaged, and my designer said, "Why do you want this photograph?" I said, "Don't you see what's happening over here? Because there is someone who's actually composing the photograph, and his reflection by mistake finds itself in the reflection of the mirror. And who's that? That's Ravi Verma. Ravi Verma's own image by mistake falls into the reflection of the mirror as this guy is being photographed. And I said, that's the man who's actually photographing. And he's probably instructing the photographer by saying, make himself like that or take this. And that's Ravi Verma's image in the reflection of the mirror. And that finds a place in volume one. So photography is extremely important to the Ravi Verma thing. We should go on to the next slide. And he uses it for the sitters. Now, there's a different dynamic here also which is happening. One is these aristocratic sitters, Maharajas and Maharanis. Do you think they would have had the time to actually sit before an artist and have these portraits painted? Obviously not. And certainly not the women. So here is a photograph from the Ravi Verma, from the Kilimanur collection of Maharani Chimnabai, and that's the painting. And what I told my designer was, I wanted to place them side by side because your eye actually goes like that, and you can actually see. Oh, so this is how she actually looked to what Ravi Verma does with the photograph. So here you're able to see, this is the background to it, and that's the mastery of the artist. And there are many of these small details which you keep picking up as you go along. So this is one aspect of it. This is when you have aristocratic sitters. And a lot of those photographs are here. You have Chandra Chavade at the tent. You have two of those photographs. You have Krishna Rajavade's sister is one of the early photographs. Then you have, of course, Chinna Bai. You have Sid Lakshman Das. You have a whole series of photographs over here. But when it came to somebody who was posing for a generic picture, that was a different game altogether. And this required really empowered women to come and say, photograph me and use it for a general photo. General, not a portrait. And that's the next slide. Let's see that. Now, here I have to tell you that this girl, and I'm going to show you who she is from volume 3. what happens interestingly is a series of these photographs are taken. So this girl comes, she's attired. You have the same backdrop, you have that same sort of velvet theme there and all of that. And Ravi Verma evidently asks her to strike several poses. One of them is for Lakshmi. The studio is using all of these photographs. And what you're seeing on the left here is a painting by C. Rajaraja Verma. C. Rajaraja Verma uses one of these photographs, and there's so much of accuracy because if you actually look at the folds of the cloth and the sari, it's exactly this. It isn't that the photograph came after the painting came after the photograph. Who is she? That's part of the taking Ravi Verma out of isolation into context because she is part of the narrative too. So the book tells you who she is, and she's a very important model. But what is interesting is there was this wonderful Instagram. I think one of these things came up on my Instagram, and there was a very interesting observation by one of the people who makes a comment and says, Ravi Verma made something called chonies. Chonies are idealized faces. So Ravi Verma, this is the girl who poses for Lakshmi, but Lakshmi's face is not this. Lakshmi's face is an idealized face. But the people in the studio, Raja Raja Verma, Frank Brooks, they are making portraits because that face is very similar to this. So you see how Ravi Verma uses the same photograph to the people in the studio are using the same photograph but doing different things. There's one here, you'll find this here, you'll also find Frank Brooks. The painting by Frank Brooks, who again uses Rajibai Mulkankar, and that's Rajibai's face.
And it's also exciting in the book that you must have dissecting some of it and talking about how Ravi Verma obviously might have asked people to pose a certain way, keeping in mind the final sort of game print. But he's also using elements of these in other paintings, right? Where one pose that has been stuck in this photo is making its way into the galaxy musicians, for example.
Galaxy musicians, he uses some of the furniture. So there's some photograph, some random girl with her, this one. But that stool features in one of the paintings. The window hinges feature in one of the paintings. So yeah, Ravi Verma is picking up different elements from photography. And volume 4, I'm not going to tell you who poses for Damayanti, but the famous Damayanti of Damayanti in the Swan, you'll have to wait till volume 4 to actually see who poses, and that's a major revolution.
Yes, but you have it photography either in
Then read
your
the book.
volume one. Volume one will tell you who, though you can't see it.
Yes, you can see. But that's a fabulous photo. It's a fabulous photograph, and imagine the difficulty to understand.
Okay, so from photography, we move now.
This we ought to
Yes,
do.
explore the European
Here go just go back. There's so much of myth surrounding Raghua. I've had people come in and say this is reminiscent of Edward Magnus Olympia, and I'm like, yeah, right.
because
This
it's
is
a
an
reclining
exact cop.
lady.
Yeah, there's a lot of myth going on Raghua Verma, and I don't know other people lap it up, but I'm like, huh.
But I think with the European influence, I believe I have read that Ravi Verma, for example, is also looking at materials from theatrical productions in Europe, for example. So like stills that were taken for theatre in Europe that also make similar thing where there's a pose and then you see the same exact pose.
A lot of that happens. He did frequent the theaters, especially the Pacific theaters in Bombay, and very eminent scholars like Deepak Kannal and Ratan Parimal have actually been able to do a compare between Marathi theater, for example, and some of Ravi Verma's works. Some of them do feature here, some of them do feature in. This is, I think, this is one of the most important paintings which features in Volume One, and it's Ravi Verma's first commissioned painting. It's Pirikapat Ramakrishna Menon. What is interesting is, if I my book was actually supposed to be the first book which had the color thing until DAG got 3 months ahead of me. But the only reason I'm happy with the DAG article is because I authored it. So I said, okay. But what is interesting also is to look into how Ravi Varma starts getting patronage. And one would imagine Maharaja is true. I'm not denying that. But Ravi Varma's first patron was a member of the legal fraternity. And Kirikapat Ramakrishna Menon was a judge of the Mangalore High Court. And this boy, uh, Raman Menon, goes on to become the Advocate General of the Madras High Court. So a whole bunch of legal people on stage now doing Ravi Varman.
So it's an old connection.
I'm hoping it is. I think, largely I keep bringing this up to sort of validate the fact that a lawyer's written on art. Yeah.
Um, one thing that I wanted just when we're looking at this image, and you kind of look at the people in terms of the costuming and the jewelry and even the hairdo and all of that. And in the book, you're talking about the fact that this work that goes to Chicago and he gets her diploma not just in art, but also in ethnography, right? And just for 1 minute to think about that, and if you want to talk a little bit, because I know you have also, of course, talked in the past about what you learn about customs or jewelry or the period and stuff through his work, but also where that situates his art in itself, right? If you think of um, the fact that obviously he was a fine artist and was being commissioned and patronized by kings and so on as well, but also that there is a public that is viewing this, whether in the country or outside, as a documentation of some sense.
In fact, I mentioned this at the MSU lecture yesterday at Baroda. I said Ravi Varma, the problem, the challenge of documenting Ravi Varma in 2020 from 2018 to 2023 was because you are looking at an India which is all but vanished. And to understand the finer details, it really required you to, one, try and go back in time. This was the challenge number one. Challenge number two was it's fine to go back in time. Now I'm a Tamil Iyer. I can go back in time for my community and say, this is a Tamil Iyer's Nainiyal sari. That I would know. But I did not know how the Maharashtrians were doing it. So it needed me to contact someone in Bombay. It needed me to contact someone in the Malabar region, in Gujarat, and things like that. So that was a major challenge. Why? Because Ravi Varma is putting onto his canvases elements which today you just don't find. Dr. Usha Balakrishnan, an eminent writer on jewelry, she was fascinated about the necklace. She says this necklace doesn't even, I've never seen it, is what she said. So imagine someone like Usha Balakrishnan not being able to see uh, something like this, and then it lands up in a Ravi Varma painting. And so these are becoming snapshots of an India which have all but vanished. This, of course, is Divan Madhav Rao. I wanted to speak about this a bit, only to tell you that the way in which Ravi Verma orchestrated his patronage was via people like this. How did he get the Maharaja Saijirao right? But he actually was helped by people like Madhav Rao. So his diplomatic abilities were really profound. His ability to get Sheshe Shastri to get him Mysore to Madhav Rao visit Baroda. This is a very interesting work. There's a story behind this painting. Is again, it goes back to the time when I was the curator with the Shilchitra Art Gallery. So it's in the first catalog and is stated to be C. Rajaraja Varma's last painting before he dies in Mysore, and we couldn't find it. And there was almost an inquiry, an official inquiry, which was going to be because how could a painting like this go missing? And we found a scrap of paper which said five paintings have gone to the Raj Bhavan. And no one knew they were in Raj Bhavan. So off this battalion went to Raj Bhavan in Trivandrum and said, we have to find these paintings. And one of them we found was this. And that features for the first time in this book. So this is Sita Charachuvarma's last.
I wanted to ask about C. Because you have this last bit on them traveling across the country and so on. I was just wondering in terms of your research because it's quite interesting. I think a lot of work that has been written, scholarship that is done on these focuses on, Father Ravi Verma. But this relationship between brothers and then traveling across was kind of interesting. And I wonder whether there was anything more in your research that came across in terms of the relationship that they're having here, because you're also talking about um, the artistic sort of intentions of both. There's a bit where you're talking about the realism of the landscapes and that Sri Rajaraja Verma is doing, and so I'm curious if you maybe talk a little bit about that.
See, Rajaraja Varma, we are able to talk about Ravi Varma because of Rajaraja. Because Rajaraja Varma was documenting things which Ravi Varma was not doing. His diary, for example, is one incredible source of information as to what these brothers are actually doing. This is one aspect. The other aspect is Rajaraja Varma also authored the Travelogue, tour of Upper India, where he's actually telling you, we went here, we saw this girl, we went there, we saw this girl, and all these people are real life characters. Rajibai, all of these people feature over there. The relationship between the brothers does not was certainly cordial, but was it? Uh, did Rajaraja Varma try to come off his own, out of the shadow or out of the eclipse of Ravi Varma? I think, and this is a guess. I think it happens only towards the very end, because the very first painting which Rajaraja Varma and Ravi Varma officially signed together is a 1904 work. The, it also features over here. It's a portrait of the Rani of Venguna, uh, later Mysore. And this is the first time Rajaraja Varma says, I want to sing the work this way. Otherwise, Rajaraja Varma singing his own works, Ravi Varma singing his own works. But the actual collaboration goes back to 1878. From 1878 to 1904, nothing was done. Although the diaries say, I painted the pillar of Damayanti, I helped paint the Pudukkottai, I did Baroda with him, I owned the press, although it was named after brother. All that features in the diary, but it never comes out. This is an exceedingly important work. It features for the first time in color in this book. And what is very interesting about this work, the title is The Brave Kusumavati and actually features on your poster. And the reason I want to spend it, this is the last slide, right? Yeah, yeah, leave this as the last slide because I want to spend some time on it. Is because this painting had never been seen until about 2, 3 years ago. And what had happened was it features as a black and white illustration in a book in 1911. So we know it is the Brave Kusumavati. Otherwise, who would have known what is going on over here? Whole bunch of people are asking me what's going on, what's going on. So it's a huge story. I'm not getting into the story today. I want to get into what the painting represents in the Ravi Varma landscape. And what I want to do is I want to also take a step back because this is the last slide, is to tell all of you what is the framework within which this exploration is being done. Because if you don't understand that, we're going to run all over and just think there is a major background, a foundational intent, a foundational framework within which this legacy is examined, and that you will find in the preface. You have to read it slowly. I'm reading it for you. Every century is characterized by a paradigm shift. The 18th century witnessed revolution, the 19th industrialization, the 20th democratization, and the 21st digitization. One led to the other, and each contributed to the evolution of not just life, but thought, perception, and ideology. The 20th century was particularly transformative, with the early part of the century standing in drastic contrast to the latter part. Monarchies were the rule in the initial decades, and as the century proceeded, they gave way to democratic governments in most parts of the world. A larger number of spaces of religious worship and sacred texts were made accessible to the general public. The century also witnessed the effects of distributive legislation, with inequalities giving way to greater sources of livelihood and opportunities for many. With power, religion, health, wealth, and education extending their reach, it was natural art would follow suit. The whole world was changing. The whole world was democratizing. How could art not follow suit? This is the proposition which I seek to address over 6 volumes. And you have to accept the fact that democracy was going to happen. It was art was never going to remain elusive. Art was never going to remain exclusive. This whole argument of inclusion had started then. We are continuing the narrative now. Now come to this painting. Democracy with Ravi Varma, a lot of us are talking about the Ravi Varma press. It's true because a lot of that happened. But democracy was also effectuated by two other means. One is photography, we already spoke of that. And the third was the creation of museums. Ravi Varma was instrumental in writing to people by saying, please create a museum, like what Abhishek and Kamini and all of you all have done here. Please create a museum, we need a space. Ravi Varma was doing it in 1895. And when he wrote for the first time to create the official document to say, I want to create a museum to Trivandrum, he said, I'm sending you a list of 5 paintings, which I think you should do. Painting number 1, The Brave Kusmavati. The Travancore Maharaja says not Brave Kusmavati, Draupadi at the Kota Virat, which now is in the Sri Chitra Art Gallery. But Ravi Varma's choice for the creation of the museum was this one. And so, since I'm in the new museum in Bangalore, we're going to end this here.
Thank you so much, Ganesh. Thank you so much, everyone. Maybe two, three quick questions, if anyone has any.
Well, very good evening. It was nice. Just beyond one general question I wanted to ask. Today, AI is taking very much in the art.
Sorry?
AI, artificial intelligence, taking AI is very much.
Digitization. I already mentioned it here. We are going to have problems with NFTs. We are already having problems with NFTs and Ravi Varma. So these are things which are going to happen. Just as the 20th century took its time to understand democracy, so much so we are actually understanding democracy only today. See, one of the things which Gayatri Sinha and I were having a conversation, we were talking and we said there was no earlier time we could have spoken of Ravi Varma, because it's only today that we actually understand we are entitled. Even in the 1970s, it wasn't in the public. We were still under an authoritative sort of mindset. It's only today with Right to Information Act, Right to Education Act, Equal Opportunities Act, that we feel we understand democracy, we understand larger social entity. And it's only now that I can re-argue Raviva. I would not have been able to do it even 10 years ago. So it's coming at the right time.
Just to continue my question and your comment, since you are also a lawyer, many are discarding
Legal opinion.
Yeah, okay, whatever. In general, I'm asking. So many are already taken doing AI works from lot of like Ravi Varma, MFs and everything. So it's how much it's correct going forward. That in that way, I want to ask.
Currently, meaning monetary wise, I
Monet-
don't know. I don't answer. I don't. I'm very bad at numbers. Yeah, I don't know numbers. Somebody keeps asking me what's the value of this, what's the value. I'll tell you what the cultural value is. I don't know the monetary. Yes.
I had a question. So it's interesting that you can view history through the lens of art, and I think you hit upon that. And I really appreciate the point that you brought up there. Just out of curiosity, did Ravi Varma address social hierarchy, caste, those
Yes.
kind of issues in his painting?
Yes.
And in your observations, what did you pick up from his work?
Ravi Varma lived at a time when feudal feudal society was very much the norm. It wasn't considered unusual. In fact, if he were to break the norm, he probably wouldn't have got half the commissions he did. He was very diplomatic. He was very careful as to how he navigated one, his patronage, and two, it naturally lends into the work, into the painting. So he would, of course, his portraits would have all had, and I do argue in volume 6, because that's the volume which deals with power, as to the elements of power which are found in some of the portraits. I'm going to give you one example here as a sort of a prelude. Take Maharaja Saijirao Gaikwad. Okay, the painting is here, but the argument is in volume 6 because we get into the details in volume 6. Maharaja Saijirao Gaikwad's investiture portrait of 1881, very impressive young man. He's standing with a black tunic and he's wearing this diamond necklace, which has three of the most important collection of diamonds in their collection: the Akbar Shah, the Star of the South, and the Princess Eugenie diamond. Just before Sayaji Rao Gaikwad came to be invested with power, Baroda was in this huge flip because Maharaja Khanderao Gaikwad and Malhar Rao Gaikwad were both, they found fault with both these Maharajas because these were the Maharajas who acquired the diamonds. And the British came, of course, they were doing it for whatever reasons, and the British thought, we have to supervise what these guys are doing. And they dethroned one of them on the pretext that they were, one, draining the exchequer, and two, there was this attempted poisoning attempt or something like that. The diamonds were the cause for the earlier Maharaja going and the new Maharaja coming. And when Saijirao Gaikwad says, paint my commission, my first portrait, what necklace does he wear? He wears the very diamonds. And he says, British, I don't care about it. I am going to. Elements like this are capable of being interpreted. So also this painting gets to be interpreted in volume 6 by saying, what does the jewelry actually stand for? So there's a lot of it which you have to sort of figure out as we go on.
Hi, Ganesh.
Right.
So, with the NMACC and the MAP, and we are going big to the world. India is going big to the world. So how can we take this legacy forward and make him the world-renowned artist, just like Van Gogh? Or,
You see, the thing is, from my perspective, is in you have to put out a good amount of academic work. Academia leads, commerce follows, and then appreciation is the last. It doesn't go the other way around. Academia has to interpret, and then people say, ha, and then they start buying it up. And then really appreciation starts taking place. So if uh, you need 60 volumes on Ravi Varma before you actually understand the magnitude of it. This is a drop in the ocean, really is in the largest. Yes. Yeah, I should actually take it up. So, the Malabar region in particular was undergoing this very intense process of re-evaluation perhaps of their attire norms. And I'm just going to read. Ravi Varma grew up and lived in a Malabari community governed by a strict hierarchical social order structured around parameters of caste, class, and age. The artist would have been well aware of the different castes prevalent at that time, their position within the social pyramid, their behavioral norms and relations with one another, and their identifying characteristics through caste marks and attire. In the presence of a member of a superior caste or class, deference had to be demonstrated in many ways. One method was to remove any cloth covering the upper body. This was generally followed by the men, but also peculiarly by the women of the Malabar region. Given that the attire in India evolved to meet convenience and changes in climate, most lower caste women in the Malabar generally did not wear an upper cloth. Nair women of the upper caste, however, did wear a thin white cloth to cover their upper cloth. However, they were required to be uncovered from the above the waist in the presence of Brahmins or other respectable people. This eventually led to a series of protests and clashes where women demanded the right to cover their upper body, eventually leading to the breastcloth revolt of the mid 19th century. Now, this is one thing which happened. Later, and I go on later on, this is juxtaposed with Victorian prudery. Ravi Varma had to strike that balance. And so he partially does what the Malabar were doing, but then he is also has to tick those Victorian boxes. Why? Because there were actually litigations going on at that time in relation to obscenity. And he didn't want to land in court. He did not land in court. As you will see in volume 2, Rangrasya did not happen. But it does tell you what actually happened. There was someone else who raised. Most of the, may I answer that also from here? It is addressed because it is a problem. These are problems which Ravi Varma did have. Just a moment, please.
If you're going to read out everything, then why will
Yeah, I
people buy
know.
your book?
Yeah, fine. Ouch. I that's an ouch. Okay, no. So what basically happened was when it came to common people, Ravi Varma had a problem. Because common people were just not posing for him. So how did he actually manage to capture some common scenes? He doesn't. Rajaraja Varma captures more of them. The way in which Ravi Varma actually does it is he goes to places where women congregate, the well, the tap, where they're washing clothes, and that's where he captures them. So actually, the aristocratic sitters were more easier. The common people were more difficult at that time.
Ganesh, tell me in your years of research, what has been the most unexpected discovery and the most interesting thing that you found that you weren't ever imagining that you would encounter?
The person who posed for Damayanti, the person who posed for Damayanti, I think it was such a startling discovery to me that it actually took me by not by surprise, by shock. I can tell you now what I mean. It anyway features. You know who posed for Damayanti in this photograph? It was Ravi Varma himself, wearing a Nuvari sari. He bunches up his kurta sleeves. He wears the Nuvari sari. He poses for the photograph. He has himself captured on a photograph and then paints the painting. And why does he do it? Is simply because he was not able to get a female model at the time. And he's a professional artist. This job has to be done. And so he dresses as a woman. This was one which is absolutely fascinating. I think another one was something which, with great difficulty, features in volume 5, and that's the episode of Vishnu being coveted by Shiva in the Mohini episode. And Shiva is actually groping Mohini. And you would not imagine Ravi Verma painting it, but it features in volume 5. So there have been a lot of that. One was this photograph of Ravi Verma captured in the reflection of the. So there's a whole bunch. I mean, I can just keep going. Yes, yes. Hello.
Hi. You touched a very important chord a few minutes ago when the lady asked you a question about, you said, how can art grow?
How can?
Ravi Verma's art be popularized, something like that. Okay,
Huh, yeah.
that's what I understood. And you said first academics must come in, and then
Yes.
commerce, and then appreciation. Now, all these years, I, for one, must confess that I had not even heard about Ravi Verma till about 20 years ago. What I'm saying is, why wouldn't somebody bring it in more into academics, the school level, because such a great artist, such great works. We read all kinds of only about Mughals and so and so, so and so, so. And so. These things must be kind of brought into the curriculum of the academics for youngsters across the country to know about these people. I
I
think with the
agree with you.
NEPS coming in, I think something has to be done more.
I agree with you. Yes.
So,
Yes.
so
I agree with you. Unfortunately, I'm not in control of the education policy, but I agree with you. I agree with you. I have Andy and Arun there. They lovely, happily do it. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
um,
No, I'll take that seriously. Why not? I mean, if a lawyer can write on art, then maybe art should change education. Why not? Why not? Yes.
so I think in a previous question you did mention that Ravi Verma was fairly diplomatic and risk averse. I don't know if you say that, but uh, and with the press coming in, his works were more available for the lower caste people, especially the religious pieces, and that was not taken well by a lot of other people in the higher caste. So, how would you sort of how do you again say that he was risk averse and diplomatic when such things come in picture? And would you also call him an activist of some sorts?
So my book is academic, so it's heavily referenced. It separates truth from fiction. So the first question, because a lot of people have mentioned that the academic class were upset when the Lakshmis and Saraswatis came out, there is no reference to it. There is no reference to it. Step one. Was he an activist? Yes. Why? Because you will realize in volume 2 that the point in time when the Lakshmi and Saraswati come out, which is 1894, religion has not been democratized. At least Hinduism hasn't. Opening up of temples takes place in 1936 with the Temple Entry Proclamation of Maharaja Chitratirunal of Travancore. From Ravi Verma well predates it by 3 decades. So yes, activist and disruptor. That's the Ravi Varma press. The Ravi Varma press did a whole bunch of stuff. But even there, the Ravi Varma press was not as belligerent for, and that is also mentioned. The Ravi Varma press is not as belligerent as the Chitrashala press. The Chitrashala press had an ideology. The Ravi Varma press did not have an ideology, but did do disruptions in certain ways. Yes. Proclamation. No. It was heavily controlled by the academic class. We take so much for granted today. We don't actually understand that when the Lakshmi came out and when the Saraswati came out, and this is also another argument in the book, is the reason why it is lapped up. For instance, there are iconographic inconsistencies. Lakshmi only has one elephant, Saraswati has a peacock, but the actual Vahan is a Hamsa. Right? Today we are able to do the analysis. But at the time in 1894, when it goes into the common space, he doesn't know anything. And that thirst is fed by the Ravi Varma press and the chromolithographs. So he laps it up by saying Saraswati with a peacock is the Vahan. Lakshmi with a single elephant is the norm. And what it sort of also gets into is it doesn't matter. It just doesn't. Yes.
Hi, Dinesh.
Oh,
Um,
Padmaja.
yes, hi.
Hi.
So, considering his intent to be democratic, that we see, and you've explained all the book and many talks, and considering that Ravi Varma presents his women with a lot of gumption in his portraits, why do you feel he felt the need to idealize the faces? There is so much detailing in the, ornaments and the costume, etc. But why did he feel the need to idealize the faces? Because there's so much in the original photographs itself.
I agree. I would argue the reason he idealized faces mostly for the divinities and the heroines like Shakuntala and all of that. And I think he did not want it to refer to any particular person. He wanted the Lakshmi to appeal to everybody. So when he paints Lakshmi and he paints Saraswati and he paints Sita and he paints Shakuntala, they're all idealized faces because probably he says she belongs to all.
And
Thank
the
you.
best part of this is the first of all the six that Ganesh is going to speak to us about
Of
in
course.
this very auditorium.
Yes. Thank you.